Welcome to the Terawatt Space Podcast. This is Aravind.
Today I'm speaking with John Murtagh from Airbus Intelligence. I don't think the company requires an introduction. Airbus Intelligence has been delivering value from satellite imagery for over 30 years. John Murtagh is the head of strategy for the intelligence program unit of Airbus Defence and Space. Since joining Airbus in 1992, John has undertaken a wide range of roles, worked in over 30 countries on all continents, and is an executive member driving intelligence strategies. In this episode, John and I talk about the Airbus Intelligence Business Unit, the Pléiades Neo mission, the One at List platform, key trends in Earth observation, and more. And now I bring you John Murtagh.
Hi, John. Thanks for being on the podcast. Let's start with introductions. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself and your role in the company?
My name's John Murtagh. You can probably tell by my accent that I'm not French. I'm a British citizen. I've been at Airbus for such a long time. I now generally tend to just say 30 years. My role is I'm the head of strategy for the part of Airbus that incorporates our satellite imagery as well as some of our defence competencies. And I am currently reside in the strategy function of Airbus Defence and Space.
How did you end up doing what you're doing now? You mentioned that you've been at Airbus for a while. So is your background in remote sensing? How did you end up doing what you're doing?
Well, I mean, when I went to university, I was introduced to remote sensing, and I became hooked pretty quickly. As part of my undergraduate degree, I really majored on remote sensing, geographic information systems. I just thought it was a fascinating area. I then kind of progressed and did a master's in the subject at Imperial in London, and I decided then that this was a domain that I wanted to work in. So as soon as I left university, I joined BP as their remote sensing specialist, working in a small exploration group. I worked there for a few years. And then I moved to the National Remote Sensing Centre in the UK, which over a period of iterations has eventually evolved into the organisation where we are now, which is the Airbus Defence and Space.
Interesting. All right. So I think that's a good note to probably start with the basics. There might be a few listeners out there who probably didn't know that Airbus has such strong Earth observation capabilities. Because, Airbus has always been associated with aviation, perhaps, space satellites, but, Earth observation being such a niche domain, people don't realize that Airbus even has an Earth observation function. So maybe, do you want to give an overview of, the Airbus Intelligence Business Unit and, what your activities are in the sector?
Yeah, sure. But let me give a little bit of context to how we fit in. As you quite rightly say, we're best known for the Airbus commercial, which is about 2/3 of the business. But a significant element of Airbus is Airbus Defence and Space, and we reside within Airbus Defence and Space. I think regarding the space activities within Airbus, I think it's worth pointing out that we are kind of vertically integrated. We do a lot of satellite manufacturing, telecom satellites, navigation, science, but also Earth observation satellites. So we operate in the upstream area. And then we also operate in the downstream area, which is where the intelligence program unit is mostly is specialised on. And clearly, we work very closely with our colleagues in space systems. To put it crudely, they build the satellites, and then we offer the service wrapper around those satellites. So in terms of what we do, I mean, our mission statement is delivering value from data in a digitally connected world. We are a lead supplier of Earth observation imagery. We operate in the optical domain, SAR domain, but also increasingly in other more esoteric areas like commercial SIGINT. We've been a world leader for 30 years. We offer the full suite of Earth observation products and services. We can go into more detail, but as well as that, the intelligence program unit, we do quite a lot of things which are less well known. We do a significant amount of defence work, in particular multi-intelligence work, where we combine lots of data sets. We do multi-source integration, a lot of software development in that kind of activity area, and we also offer some command and control systems. So you can see that our business is on the downstream Earth observation. We try to cover all the different verticals. We operate across the different resolution and data domains, but we also are well connected with the other elements of Airbus, which are involved in different platform developments, which are relevant to our business.
All right, that makes sense. And you mentioned that you're vertically integrated, and you have quite a lot of activity going on in terms of the Earth observation programs. Do you want to quickly talk about what are the Earth observation satellites that Airbus has today? Because we've been hearing about one recently a lot, which is Pléiades Neo, and we'll get to it in a bit. But I was also curious to get an overview of what are the various EO satellites from Airbus.
Yeah, we do have a constellation of different commercial satellites which operate in a variety of resolutions and modes. So just to give a little bit of perspective, it started out with the Spot series of satellites, a French state initiative for which we had the commercialization contract. So that started in '86. That developed, and then we have the Spot 6 and 7, which are currently operational. There were Airbus investments, and then that matured into the Pléiades constellation, which again was a French state program, and that's evolved into Player NEO, which we'll talk about later. So the first point is that we've been closely aligned to the French national program, specifically in optical data. Then I should say that in the SAR domain, which is an area in particular of German competence, we've had a series of public-private partnerships with the German Space Agency, the DLR, and we've built up a SAR business, which consists of TerraSAR-X, Tandem-X. We're quite well known for WorldDEM, which is a global elevation data set derived interferometrically. We now have introduced PATH, which is a Spanish satellite, again built by Airbus, into the constellation. So those are the two main pillars of the business in France and in Germany. And in the UK, we're also active there. We use satellites which are built by an Airbus subsidiary in the UK, Surrey Satellite Limited. Vision 1, for example, is a sub-meter resolution data, and we sell that. It's worth making the point that we operate in a portfolio of different data sets, and the idea is that we satisfy a wide range of use cases, but increasingly the business is orientated more towards kind of data fusing and being able to use these data sets together. So clearly that's a clear activity for us. One thing I would like to mention is, as well as these large programs which I've mentioned, we've also invested in Hawkeye 360, which is one of a new breed of commercial RF surveillance satellites. So we use that, and we incorporate that data with some of our more traditional data sets. So I hope that gives you a quick overview of the data sets that we've got. But for us, the main focus at the moment is ensuring the successful deployment of the Pléiades Neo constellation.
All right, thanks. I think that gives a very good overview of all the sensors and instruments you have out there. And I mean, you do seem to have, bunch of sensors, not just optical, SAR, and you also mentioned the radio frequency link with Hawkeye 360. All right, so let's get to Pléiades Neo then. Let's deep dive on Pléiades Neo. So let's start with, what is this new program from Airbus? What is Pléiades Neo, and what was the motivation for it? what is the status now, and also maybe what are its capabilities?
Sure. Well, Pléiades Neo, as I alluded to previously, is a key priority for us. We believe that it's an activity which will confirm us in the position of being the leading European provider of Earth observation services. It's a private European constellation. It represents Airbus investment, and I believe that it's a very positive statement of the future, showing that we believe in the market, we're investing in the market, we want to create and develop the market. In terms of its capabilities, it really is kind of lifts the bar, we believe. The quality of the imagery is quite spectacular. I would urge anyone to have a look at our website for some sample images. It's 30 centimeter native resolution. It really puts us at we believe, the tip of the iceberg. It represents an enormous investment by Airbus. It's Airbus funded, but it's also Airbus built and developed. Okay, so we've closely worked with our upstream competencies. We've refined those capabilities. We've added some very innovative elements. So, for example, the space data highways. So this is laser connectivity. So we believe that we're deploying a constellation which will be producing intelligence grade imagery, very high quality imagery, and we're going to be kind of like wrapping it up with kind of very good services in terms of reactivity, accuracy of the data, routes to market. Okay, so in terms of the mechanics of what it actually is, the current constellation is 4 identical satellites. 2 were launched last year and have been successfully deployed, and commercial operations have started. 2 are going to be launched later in the year. So that would be a 4-satellite constellation. It will be able to acquire imagery twice per day at any latitude. It's really at the cutting edge in terms of commercial resolution, quality of imagery, the accuracy of the geolocation. So we'll be bringing to market 2 million square kilometers of this high-end imagery per day, daily revisit everywhere. Also, the agility of these satellites are very high, so we can acquire in mono, stereo, tri-stereo, you name it. We've really thrown a lot of innovation at this satellite.
That seems exciting. Is there anything that Pléiades Neo offers that was not possible before? I think you mentioned a couple of things. One, the resolution, and I think you also mentioned the space data highway. Those are 2 things that strike as something that is different with regards to Pléiades Neo. So could you talk about what would be the offerings of Pléiades Neo that was not possible before?
Yeah. I think the key element of Pléiades Neo is that it really kind of, we believe, kind of will kind of lifts the bar. It definitely is an advance on previous generations of satellites. We believe that it's for so many developments which kind of cumulatively add to what we believe will be a very compelling product on the commercial marketplace. The satellites are very agile, they're very precise, very reactive. And what this allows us to do is, for example, we have the imagery quality is very high. 30 centimeter native is a step change to what we've had before. In terms of the regularity of revisit, it's much higher. The geolocation accuracy is we've done some testing. It's now within 3.5 meters CE 90. It gives us the ability to kind of task and give our customers more assurance that we'll be able to acquire imagery which satisfies their use cases and timelines. One point to emphasize is the reactivity is much higher. Customers are allowed to request up to 50 minutes before a planned upload, and delivery can be as low as 25 minutes coming up. We realise that though people focus on accuracy, it's only one part of the equation. But then there are so many other elements which are perhaps not immediately obvious. So, for example, all the imagery that we and our constellation of satellites produce is all geolocated using the same reference planes. That means that they're all co-located, but co-located in a way, in a degree of precision which enables, it's ready for analytics. We've totally upgraded the processing and the flow lines. It's all cloud enabled, ready for bulk processing of data. It's clearly we're going through a learning curves, learning about how a new tool used, but so far the indications are very good. And then we'll be bringing online the ability to use the space data highway. This is allows a laser to go to transmit data from the satellite to a geosatellite to improve the latency. So, if you're looking at the resolution, you're looking at very fast reactivity, you're looking at, flexibility in terms of tasking, and then the satellites themselves being very agile and allowing you to acquire imagery to satisfy use cases. One other element which again, I think it's important is in terms of the spectral capabilities. We've invested in a new deep blue band, which really helps us in applications, bathymetric applications as well. So that opens some new use cases, which we are more than happy to satisfy.
All right, I think there is quite a lot of new things there with Pléiades Neo.
One element I want to just emphasize as well is that for a lot of our customers, sovereignty is important. So the ability to that every link of the chain, from the tasking to the final acquisition and then dissemination of the data, we can kind of control that. We know what's where, and it gives some assurance to customers for whom such elements are important.
All right, we talked about what I call the acquisition part of the Earth observation market, which is about the collection of data. And now maybe let's move on to the dissemination side and how people access data and can use platforms to access Earth observation data. And that brings me to one of the products that you have at Airbus Intelligence, which is One Atlas, correct? So should we probably then start with a quick overview of what One Atlas is? What is its purpose and how did it come about?
In the Earth observation area, it's clearly our incentive is to get the data to the customers in a way in which they see fit. Okay, so we have a portfolio of solutions which allows this. So just to give you a perspective is that, so for example, a significant part of our business is selling access to our satellites, telemetry, so a ground receiving stations, and that might go all the way to producing a direct receiving station for a customer, on their sovereign territory, something they can kick, a piece of infrastructure, and all around that with an intelligence center, very high end. Okay. However, that's not for everyone. Our customers are increasingly demanding access to our data in a digital way. So One Atlas is our solution for doing that. Okay, so basically it's the digital platform that is at the core of our digital services. Okay, so we've tried to streamline our services, and we put it under the One Atlas umbrella. Okay, so what this allows us to do is basically threefold. Firstly, it allows you to access imagery. There are currently about 5 million images from the various satellites, something in a Pléiades Neo spot, and that gives us kind of like a curated library. We will filter out ones which are very cloudy, for example. Okay, it allows us to some pretty value-added services. So, for example, the ability to task. So we can, a customer can have access to One Atlas, and they can task our satellite. I think that's a very compelling proposition. We also offer a series of layers, so base maps or elevation models. So these are often useful to satisfy different kind of activities, particularly in the geosolutions area. And then the third element that we're offering is a service wrapper. Okay, so we offer qualified analytics either from ourselves. Or we have an ecosystem of partners. So I'm thinking of Ecopia, Orbital Insight, Pléiades, and they produce analytics which are generally speaking for particular applications, be it building footprints, producing a map, change detection, or it could be the identification of specific objects, so for example trucks or cars and such like. So we have that as a service wrapper. And then, of course, on the top of that, this is kind of like a gateway to our geosolutions capabilities. So you can, if you have a maritime surveillance application, you've got the access to the satellites, the ability to run an algorithm. So, for example, a ship detection algorithm, and then it allows you to do a service. So, it's early days. We've certainly invested a lot in this, a lot of energy. Our customers are very demanding, and quite rightly they should be. But we're pleased with where we are in One Atlas, and we see that this is an area of definitely activity. It's definitely an area where we're investing significant resources, and will continue to do so because it's something that our customers are demanding: more seamless access to our satellites, and then over time the capabilities will become even more comprehensive.
All right, One Atlas does seem very interesting, and we discussed the capabilities of One Atlas with respect to the different layers that you mentioned, but also analytics. Are there any specific use cases that these analytics are relevant for? Because you mentioned partners like Orbital Insight, Pléiades, and it's part of the analytics layer of One Atlas, if I can put it like that, and thematic services. Are there specific markets that it's focused on specifically, or is it is it a general platform for all markets?
What we're doing is basically giving our customers the tools to do what they wish. Okay, clearly there are some markets which lend themselves to the capabilities of our satellites, as we discussed with Pléiades Neo, but that's not to limit it to just those verticals. You talked on analytics. I mean, we think we have quite a reasonably comprehensive range of analytics working with our partners. So, for example, Ecopia. This is mostly around buildings, building footprints, land cover. Hyperverge. This is basically focused on infrastructure, change detection. Orbital Insight, object detection, cars, trucks, aircraft, and then through a French organisation, Pléiades, with they're more specialist on the defence perimeter, so it could be military aircraft and such like. So we believe that the ability to do change detection and object detection is applicable to most verticals, though of course that can be refined over time. And one thing is certain: when you're requiring 2 million square kilometers of data per day, you're going to be able to build up your libraries pretty good for AI algorithm development.
All right, so that's a very good overview of what One Atlas is, and to get to the final segment, I wanted to ask you about the general trends in the Earth observation market today. We've talked a lot on the podcast. There's a lot of buzz now around Earth observation. So I want to get your thoughts on what are some key market dynamics that you're observing at Airbus, and is that impacting your roadmap and what's to come?
Okay, so if I was to really focus on three elements of that, and of course there are many more macro trends in our business at the moment, but I think the first one, and this basically touches on what we've just been talking about, which is our customers are increasingly demanding ease of access to the data. And quite rightly too, they're demanding in terms of quality and service offering and service level agreements. These things are characteristic of a market which is maturing, and it's our role to work with our customers to satisfy those requirements. So that's one key trend. They expect robust APIs to their data. They want their data to feed directly into their GIS or production processes. I mean, these are perfectly reasonable things to do, and this is what we focus on doing. Another key element, which more of a macro element, and it's not just Earth observation related, but this element of sovereignty, I think, is key. The satellite infrastructure that we operate is increasingly, and we're an example. It's not unique to Airbus, but it's increasingly part of critical national infrastructure. It's not really kind of like a country's plaything. They are assets which are valuable. They have importance. They need to be protected. They deliver services which at different times are of highly important data, and I think that's become an acknowledgement, not just EO, but navigation and Earth observation and connectivity satellites. But from Earth observation that we're focusing on now, clearly the sovereignty element is important, and we're getting an increasingly complex interplay between the public and private sectors, which Airbus is part of it, but it's common to all the operators. There's this quite a compelling dynamic where the public sector can do some things, the private sector can do other elements, and they essentially work together to meet requirements. There's another area which is maybe a little bit more sensitive, but if we look at the current crisis, the catastrophe which is opening to the east of Europe with Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, I think it's a lot of satellite imagery has been seen there, but also a lot of other imagery sets. For example, camcorders from cars and whatever. And I really think if we were to distill something down that, I think we can see that satellite imagery in the right hands is kind of like an antidote to fake news. Okay, because if the satellite imagery can show what is going on at a particular time. So I think that's an important element. I think that will become increasingly acknowledged in the future. I think it's it does have an important role to play. So those are the three trends I would describe as macro trends. Of course, there are many others. I think increasingly data fusion is important. The ability to seamlessly fuse not just optical, SAR and RF, but with other data sets in the future, IoT, for example. We've got a lot of experience in that. So, for example, we for the non-US AWACS, so these aircraft which fly around and take lots of different data sets. We do a lot of the multi-source integration software for that. So, we have an appreciation of that area, certainly from the defence elements of our business. And I see that kind of spilling over into the commercial sector. Not the same data sets, but the same spirit of basically extracting as much value you can out of the data and the variety of data, and really kind of satisfying the information requirements that you have, but with a high degree of flexibility. I think that's an important trend. And other trends will be there's an increasing proliferation in the number of satellites. That's a new entrance. That's a sign of a healthy market. Do you have any views on any particular trends which are worth highlighting?
Well, I think what you mentioned about the data fusion is very important, because the way I've seen the market for the last 5 years is one type of imagery has always been the focus, and we know that when a customer is looking at solving a problem, they probably don't care about the type of imagery or where it was taken from, aircrafts, camcorders, or even satellites. They don't care. They just want to solve the problem, right? So I think the data fusion element is pretty intriguing, and I think the market is finally going towards that, because I feel like in the future there will not be a leader for optical. There will not be a leader for SAR. It'll rather be who's the best in solving a problem, who's the best for agriculture, right? And that cannot be just an optical solution or just a SAR solution, or even in defense, right? It can't just be an optical high resolution. It's going to be fusion of different type of sensors and the ability to have that available in one platform. And I guess that's kind of where you guys are going towards.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, and I completely share that, and that's really our direction of travel. I mean, in some verticals, so for example, maritime, you have to be able to use for different data sets. That's demanded. If you have a ship and for whatever reason they've turned off their AIS, then then you can get an image to show that there is a ship there. It's demanded. And I think that will spill over into other verticals.
100%. You mentioned new entrants, and I've been tracking in the industry, and to be honest, right now it's becoming very hard to track in terms of the people who are launching satellites and the companies, and the capabilities they have to offer. So I was curious. So how does Airbus keep itself differentiated in such a crowded and fragmented market, really?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, clearly for a lot of new entrants into the markets, I mean, we do track them, and as I mentioned earlier, we have invested in them, and other elements of our business are often involved in the manufacture of these constellations. So we are vigilant in this area, and clearly the way that the new entrants in particular operate is to search out their own compelling niches. So of course, if they come up with something interesting, then we'll be interested to talk to these with these people. However, clearly with the significant volume of satellites which are being launched, I think it's really worth emphasising that it's one thing to have an idea and to have a concept and build a demo, but it's a very different thing to be able to produce a compelling service proposition which meets the exacting requirements of our customers, both in terms of delivery and price. Okay, in order to differentiate ourselves, the best recourse we've got is to focus on the innovation, which is very much part of Airbus's DNA. Bring these new capabilities to the market. Bring capabilities which we believe are compelling, and which we believe are competitive, as good as, if not better, than our competitors. So that's in the one direction, and in the other direction, be sensitive to what else is going on. If an SME produces a data set which is particularly compelling, and we see it as being as having an important role to play in a new service proposition. So the example of Hawkeye 360 I mentioned, then of course we'll be ready to take benefits of that. It would be taking a longer perspective. I mean, clearly the amount of money coming into to space has increased. The evolution between just 21 and first few months of 22, though heavily skewed towards companies like Virgin Galactic and SpaceX and the like. But if you look at a macro trend, I do see that as being part of a healthy market.
I was also curious because you mentioned partner with companies that are producing new data sets and keep on track with what's going on in the market, and that's on the data side. I was curious also on your capabilities on the value-added services or analytics, how we want to call it, that side, because your partnership with Pléiades and Orbital Insight and Ecopia, that is more on the value-added services side. Yeah. I think it is pretty interesting as well, because you're not just focusing on only the data part, but also on what are we doing with that data as well?
Yeah, we take a view that our portfolio of activities has to cover the data element. So, I mentioned selling access to the satellites through telemetry, but we also acknowledge that there are customers who want a derived solution from those satellites. So there are many ways in which that can be manifested. So, for example, we have developed some very strong competencies in extracting biophysical parameters from data. Some very kind of leading edge kind of image processing techniques, and we use that to service markets in the environmental and agricultural sector. So, clearly we can't cover all bases. So we cover the ones which we think are important. We'll partner where we believe that adds value, and where it's an area where, for whatever reason, we don't focus on. Of course, we're making the tools available to our customers, and we'll more be happy to co-create with them. And I think, we look at some markets which are being more mature than others, so defence will be a relatively mature one, maritime relatively mature. But then we look at some other markets, so for example, financial services, where we've got some good competences of an area, we are active in the area, but we look to scale it. The logical thing to do is to work on geosolutions, and a primary element of that is to find the right partners. So that clearly is a topic for us at the moment.
Makes sense. And you mentioned commercial sectors and defense and maritime being, let's say, the early adopters of Earth observation data, and financial services, as you mentioned, is starting to look at Earth observation data a lot more because a lot more data is becoming available. So I was curious, how do you see the use of Earth observation in these, new sectors? I don't know if I should call them new sectors, but maybe they've been using it, but not, mainstream. But would we see them starting to use Earth observation data mainstream, integrate it into their daily processes? And, there's a difference between using Earth observation data in their innovation team to try it out versus implementing it in their mainstream workflow, right? So do we see that happening?
Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean, in some ways, just even talking about verticals is a very kind of crude and old-fashioned way of doing it. And I do agree that there is this kind of crossing the chasm between doing an innovation, a trial project, and getting it to be in a commercial service. Okay, but that's reality. I mean, that's what it's about. I mean, it doesn't mean you should stop doing the innovation, but it's all about trying to support the use cases which you think have most potential, which is sometimes surprising. But you're right. There's a quantum leap in terms of maturity. So in the defence primitive, that goes back to Napoleonic times when they used balloons and such like. Whereas financial services, for example, it is very much driven by legislation. So now that banks, for example, insurers, for example, are told to stress test their assets based on climate change, that's been mandated. Earth observation has a role to play in that. Clearly, the EO element is a relatively small segment of the whole solution, but it has an important role to play. In terms of kind of educating the users, that's where the real challenge is, because you can often find that in an organisation or a vertical there was a very enthusiastic champion of it, but getting that kind of mentality to go throughout the organisation, can take some time. So you're right, but our role is to satisfy customer needs where they believe they have there's potential in some of these new markets, which are by definition fast growing if there is take up, but at the same time satisfy requirements of mature markets, which they might be mature in terms of the number of years that they've been doing it and the budgets and whatever, but they're certainly not stable in terms of their user requirements. These are organisations which are very innovative, not just innovative technically, but in terms of business models. So, for example, outsourcing more capabilities and the like. So, I don't know. I guess in a nutshell, the fact that there's so much rapid change in this business, so many new data sets coming to the market, different stakeholders being impacted by different, for example, regulatory changes, the capabilities that the cloud brings in terms of being able to access third-party data and be able to fuse them. All these things are going in the right direction. And the fact that it is so dynamic is really one of the reasons why I've kind of worked in this area for so long. There are relatively few unknown knowns.
All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we close?
There are no real points. I think we've covered quite a lot. I mean, I think the points to emphasise is that Pléiades Neo is a big deal for us. It represents an enormous investment from Airbus into this sector. So it is a positive statement of the future. We hope and think that it satisfies a lot of requirements which are increasingly important. The ability to fuse data, the sovereignty of the data, they really stand out. We're doing what we can to make the data accessible as seamlessly as possible for our customers. It's always an area where we can, we have to be humble, but it's always an area where we can get better. But we are building on 30 years of experience in that area. We're deploying the capability now. The satellites 3 and 4 will launch later in the year, so that's our focus. And then in parallel, clearly we're working on lots of other elements of the business, geosolutions, links to other parts of Airbus, how we can ensure that our satellite data is involved in new concepts, for example, combat cloud, and other capabilities. So it's a constantly evolving process where it's really imperative that we remain at the sharp end in terms of innovation, bringing this to the market.
All right. That brings us to the end. Thanks, John. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure.
Hey, this is Arvind again. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the Terawatt Space podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. Also, feel free to sign up for my newsletter, Terawatch on Substack. That is terawatch.substack.com, where I attempt to decode the recent developments in space tech and its impact on Earth. Thanks again, and hope to see you for the next episode.